So people being entertained by violence is a tale as old as time. From stories like the Iliad to Roman gladiators fighting in the coliseum, there's just something about it that's visceral, that's cathartic. And sex is also something that's prominent in media and entertainment, although that hits for a little bit of a different reason. I remember growing up having a conversation with my friend's mom about the types of movies that she would allow us to watch. She was a mom and a Christian and didn't feel like it was appropriate for us to watch movies if it had a sex scene in it. However, violence she didn't have a problem with. So violence all day long, but if it had a sex scene, the movie was out. And today this idea may seem very silly to us. I mean, we're just inundated with media and graphic images with content, and it's almost impossible to avoid. So how should we view sex and violence in our entertainment as Christians? Does what we watch matter? Sure, a discerning individual may understand that it's fake, but does it still affect us? And what does the Bible have to say? Let's take a look.
Attention, bargain shoppers.
So how should Christians feel about sex and violence in the media that we consume? Well, there is an idea out there based on Romans 14:23, which tells us, everything that does not come from faith is a sin. So this would be a belief that anything that doesn't glorify God is a sin, and therefore the enjoyment of something that has violence or sex in it would be wrong, even though it's fictional content. However, personally, I feel like this is an overly simplistic interpretation of this verse. I mean, we're told in Genesis 1:27, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. So God did what God does. He created. And he created us in his image with consciousness, with a drive to create, toward creativity. One could argue that anytime we create anything, we are acting in God's image. Whenever we pull something from our imagination and bring it into this reality, that we are glorifying God. We are acting in his likeness, how he created us to be. So one could argue that whenever we create or appreciate works of creation, a work of art, a painting, a story, music, that we are appreciating God and the creation that he allows us to display. But what if that work of art depicts something that is detestable to God, showing violence that he would not condone or sex in a gratuitous context? Where's that line of what's acceptable or not? Well, movie and media critics attempt to draw this line. They would ask questions like, is the imagery being shown in service to the story? Or is it just there for shock value and no appreciable reason? The idea is that they would see violence in a movie, say about the Holocaust, differently than violence in like a slasher film. But would it be wrong from a Christian standpoint to enjoy sitting down and watching a slasher movie? I mean, if someone understands that what's being shown on the screen is fictional, that it is completely fake, then what would be the problem with watching it? And this is a question that's actually very similar to a question Paul was dealing with back in the day. See, there was an issue in his time about eating meat that was sacrificed to idols. An idol is a god that is fake, that is untrue. And we as Christians understand it to not be real. So knowing this, is it okay to go ahead and eat this food anyway? Well, in 1 Corinthians 8, Paul tells us, so then, about eating food sacrificed to idols, we know that an idol is nothing at all in the world, and that there is no God but one, the Father, from whom all things came and for whom we live. And then Paul goes on to say in verse 8, food does not bring us near to God. We are no worse if we do not eat, and no better if we do. So Paul says here pretty clearly, if you know the truth about something, then doing it is not really a big deal. Much like consuming food sacrificed to idols, if you consume a slasher movie with the understanding that it's fake and that God would never condone something like this in real life, Paul would say, you're no worse if you don't, and you're no better if you do. But Paul doesn't just say this and move on. He gives it a little asterisk here. In 1 Corinthians 8, 9 through 11, he says, be careful, however, that the exercise of your right writes, does not become a stumbling block to the weak. For if someone with a weak conscience sees you with all your knowledge eating in an idol's temple, won't that person be emboldened to eat what is sacrificed to idols? So this weak brother or sister for whom Christ died is destroyed by your knowledge. So Paul does say that people's knowledge of the truth is taken into account when making these decisions on whether or not it's okay to consume something which has been sacrificed or made in honor of something other than God. And Paul also takes into account here the strength of that knowledge. Weakness is a possible factor for both the people consuming it and those around us who watch what we do. There are some people who can go to a movie, who can watch the movie understanding that it's fake, and whose faith is just as strong when the movie is done as when they walked into the theater in the first place. And there are some people that this is not the case. For example, Isaiah 41:10 says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be afraid, for I am your God." So being fearful is not from God. God is more powerful than anything in this world. And when our faith is strong, there's no reason to be afraid. So if somebody goes to a movie that leaves them feeling fearful afterwards, this could be feeding a weakness that you have or exposing something in you which probably should be avoided. Similarly, we have 1 Corinthians 6:18, which says, "Flee from sexual immorality." See, there are some people that can watch a sex scene in a movie, and they can understand that these actors are filming a scene in a room with probably 20 other people. When you're watching it, it seems like they're alone. But the truth is that there's a director and producers, you've got grips, boom operators, and lighting people. I mean, this is a very fake thing that is being portrayed. However, not everyone has that level of understanding. To some, sexual imagery is an area of weakness. And Paul would say that if it's for you that way, or if your actions make it harder for people around you to stay on the path, then it would be better just to avoid it. So at the end of the day, it's not a sin for Christians to watch movies with fictionalized sex or violence. However, it is important to have an understanding of the truth about how these things affect us and how they affect those around us. If it does either of those things in a negative way, probably better to avoid. So there you have it. I hope you found it interesting. If you did, please feel free to like and subscribe. It does help out the channel, or leave a comment below. I'll leave the verses used today in the description. My name is Adam. This is Bargain Bin Theology, and remember, you get what you pay for.